Hi, it's Selina's Love Chronicles. Tonight's story isn't about victory. It's about the girl who chose to lose, 3 days after her twin sister's death. Raina Silvercrest stood before her father's throne, ordered to take the Luna trials in her sister's place. But she had already decided something no one could ever know. Because some secrets aren't meant to win. They're meant to burn everything down. What she didn't expect was that the rival alpha watching from the shadows would see through her plan and claim her anyway. The rain had not stopped since Era's funeral. It slid down the castle walls like the sky itself was mourning her. Inside her chamber, Raina sat at the edge of the bed she once shared with her twin, the silence pressing against her lungs. Every sound felt distant. The crackle of the fire, the echo of boots in the corridor below, the faint howl that drifted from the cliffs. Raina's hands tightened around the pendant her sister used to wear. It was cold now, just a shard of silver against her skin, but it kept her from falling apart. She should have cried instead. Her tears had turned to stone. The door opened without warning. Pine and steel filled the air, her father's scent before his voice. "Get up!" He stood framed in the doorway, tall and immovable. Behind him, the storm made him a silhouette of authority and exhaustion. His eyes didn't soften when they met hers. "The Luna trial begins in 1 week," he said. "The pack must not appear weak." A pulse of disbelief struck her. "Father, Era is—" He cut her off. "You will compete as her. No one will know the difference." The weight of his order landed heavier than the rain outside. She wanted to scream that she was not her sister, that no training, no braid, no armor could change that. But his expression told her the argument was already lost. When he left, the scent of command lingered. Raina stared at the window until the world blurred, until the storm outside matched the storm inside her. That night, she made her choice. If she must fight in her sister's name, she would not win for him. She would lose for herself. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the castle draped in a quiet too sharp to bear. Raina rose from her bed without feeling rested. The air still smelled of rain and stone, of endings that refused to end. Her mother waited by the hearth, her face pale from sleeplessness. She tried to smile when Raina entered, but it faltered halfway, becoming something fragile instead. "You should eat," her mother said softly. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" Raina's voice came out hollow. "To become a ghost." Idara flinched at the bitterness in her daughter's tone, but didn't answer. She simply poured tea and placed it in Raina's hands, as if warmth alone could fix what grief had broken. Outside, the courtyard echoed with the sounds of training, swords clashing, orders barked, boots striking the wet ground. It was the rhythm of life, continuing without permission. Raina stood at the window and watched. Warriors sparred beneath the gray sky, their movements precise and violent. She spotted her father among them, giving commands with the same iron certainty that had ruled their lives since Era's death. "He doesn't mourn like we do," she thought. "He turns grief into discipline." When he noticed her watching, his gaze met hers for a heartbeat, cold, assessing, before turning away. She knew what it meant. He was already shaping her into a replacement, not a daughter. Later, Bryn found her in the old training hall, the one she and Era used to sneak into as children. Dust floated in the shafts of light cutting through the high windows. The sight of it all, the wooden dummies, the scent of leather and sweat, pulled at memories she wasn't ready to feel. "Raina," Bryn said cautiously, stepping closer. "I heard what he's asking you to do. I don't have a choice." "That's not true." Raina's laugh was sharp, humorless. "In this pack, choice belongs to those who win." "I've never been one of them." Bryn frowned, her eyes glistening with something between sympathy and anger. "You don't have to be Era to survive this." "I'm not trying to survive it." The words slipped out before Raina could stop them. Bryn froze. "What does that mean?" Raina turned away, tracing her fingers along the scarred wood of the nearest training dummy. "It means I'll do what he asks. I'll enter the Luna trials. But I won't win them." Bryn's breath caught. "You'll fail on purpose?" Raina met her gaze, steady now. If the pack wants Era's legacy, they can build it from ashes, not lies. Bryn wanted to protest, but she saw something in Raina's eyes that silenced her, the quiet, steady resolve of someone who had already lost everything worth losing. That night, Raina returned to her sister's chamber. Era's armor hung from a stand near the bed, polished and waiting. The scent of steel mixed with pine still clung to it, ghostly and familiar. She reached out, brushing her fingers along the cold leather. "You were always the stronger one," she whispered. "But maybe strength isn't what Father needs this time. Because sometimes the only way to take back power is to surrender it first." Chapter 2. The Preparation. The morning after her decision, the castle stirred before sunrise. Bells rang through the mist, calling the pack to gather in the lower courtyard. Raina stood at her window, watching as the warriors assembled in precise formation, their armor glinting under the pale light. From above, they looked like living shadows, moving in rhythm to a song only duty could play. Her mother's knock came softly. "It's time," she said. Raina followed her through the corridor, her footsteps echoing against the cold stone. The air smelled of oil, steel, and pine resin, the scent of tradition, of rules carved into generations. In the training yard, her father was already waiting. The alpha's presence bent the air around him, his expression unreadable. Beside him stood two seasoned instructors, their faces lined from years of battle. "Raina," her father said, his tone clipped. "From this moment until the trials begin, you will live as Era did. You will move as she moved, speak as she spoke. There will be no distinction." She bowed her head slightly. "Yes, father." One of the instructors, Captain Tereth, stepped forward. "Your sister trained here daily for 6 hours. You'll do the same. We'll begin with stance correction and combat drills." Raina glanced at the weapons rack, lined with blades polished to a mirror shine. Era's sword rested among them, its hilt worn smooth by her twin's hands. When Raina lifted it, the weight felt wrong, heavier than memory should allow. "Grip tighter," Tereth instructed. Era never hesitated. Raina bit back a reply. Her arms strained as she mirrored the movements she had studied from the old practice journals. Step, guard, strike. Step, guard, strike. Each repetition was a ghost of her sister's form, familiar but not her own. By the 3rd hour, sweat clung to her hair and her palms ached. Every mistake drew a correction barked by Tereth, followed by her father's cold gaze from across the yard. "You're holding back," Godric said at last. Again, Raina forced her breathing to steady. "I'm trying. Trying isn't enough." His tone was ice. "If you fail the trial, the pack will lose its standing." "You will not shame your sister's memory." The words sliced through her composure. She lowered her blade and whispered, "I could never be her." Her father's reply was swift. "Then learn to be what she was supposed to become." He turned and walked away, leaving her to the silence that followed. The air felt heavier without his presence, as if even the clouds hesitated to move. When training finally ended, her arms trembled from exhaustion. Bryn appeared near the gate, holding a flask of water. "You're pushing too hard," she said. Raina took the flask, her throat dry. "It's what he wants. It's not what you need." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, Raina allowed herself to soften. Bryn had always been her anchor, the one person who saw beyond her father's commands and the pack's expectations. "Do you ever wonder," Raina said quietly, "if duty is just another kind of cage?" Bryn hesitated. "Maybe. But cages break eventually." Raina looked toward the horizon where the mountains cut the sky in jagged silhouettes. "Not this one," she murmured. That night, she returned to her sister's chamber again. On the desk lay Era's notes, pages of tactical diagrams, leadership philosophies, and personal reflections. Raina ran her fingers across the ink, tracing the loops of her twin's handwriting. One entry caught her attention. "Strength is not what they think it is. It's knowing when not to strike." Raina stared at the line for a long moment. It felt like a message left behind, one her sister never had the chance to explain. A chill wind crept through the window, carrying the scent of pine and rain. Somewhere beyond the valley, a wolf howled, the sound stretching long into the night. Raina closed the book and looked at her reflection in the mirror across the room. The candlelight split her face in half. One side shadowed, one side lit. "Tomorrow," she whispered to that reflection, "I become you." But beneath her words, another truth pulsed quietly. "And I will end this lie before it ends me." Chapter 3. The First Trial. Dawn broke sharp and cold over Silvercrest Hold. Frost clung to the courtyard stones, glimmering beneath the rising sun like the remnants of shattered glass. From her chamber window, Raina watched as the banners of 5 allied packs were raised one by one, their colors unfurling in the wind. Blood red, midnight blue, forest green, silver, and black. Today marked the beginning of the Luna trials. Her mother entered quietly, a folded set of ceremonial leathers draped over her arms. "You must look the part," she said, her voice a whisper of calm in the tension-filled air. Raina touched the outfit, the same style her sister had worn during training, the silver stitching marking her lineage. "Does it still smell like her?" she asked without thinking. Idara's expression faltered. "It smells like duty." She helped Raina into the leathers, tightening the straps until Raina could barely draw a full breath. Every motion felt like surrender. The mirror showed her a reflection that wasn't hers. Sharp eyes, braided hair, posture too proud for the heart that beat beneath it. "Remember," her mother said, smoothing the collar, "Era always led with her right foot when she entered a fight. Keep your guard high. Never hesitate." "I remember." Idara hesitated, her gaze softening. "You don't have to be perfect, just convincing." Raina didn't answer. Perfection had never been the goal. Convincing failure, that was her mission. The great hall of Silvercrest had been transformed. Torches burned bright along the stone walls, and a ring of polished armor gleamed in the center where the trials would take place. The hum of voices filled the air. Alphas, envoys, and warriors from every allied pack gathered to witness. When Raina entered, the hall fell into a hush. Her father walked beside her, his presence radiating command. "Chin up," he murmured. "They must see Era, not you." She obeyed, stepping forward as the ancient healer, Elder Mora, raised her staff. Representing the Silvercrest pack, Mora announced, "Era, daughter of Alpha Godric." Raina bowed, her heart pounding as 1,000 eyes followed her every move. Then she felt it, the weight of a stare that didn't look away. Across the room, among the visiting alphas, one figure stood apart. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a presence that seemed to quiet even the restless murmurs around him. His hair was dark, his gaze sharper than any blade in the room. When their eyes met, the noise of the crowd dissolved. Something deep inside her stirred. Not recognition, not fear, but a quiet awareness that felt almost alive. Her father leaned close. "That's Alaric of Thornvale," he said, voice low. "Watch yourself. Their pack has never been our ally." The healer's voice rose, signaling the start of the first trial, combat. 2 candidates entered the ring before her. Their duels swift and brutal. Steel clashed, sparks flew, and the scent of sweat filled the air. The crowd cheered as one yielded, breathless. Then came her name. Raina stepped into the ring. The sword in her hand felt heavier than it had in training. Her opponent, a warrior from the Mooncliff pack, was older, faster, seasoned by years of battle. "Begin," Elder Mora commanded. The strike came immediately. Raina barely parried, the impact vibrating up her arm. She retreated 2 steps, trying to steady her breathing. Her father's earlier words echoed, "No hesitation." But hesitation was all she had. The next blow came harder, a downward arc that grazed her shoulder and tore the leather. She pivoted right, narrowly avoiding another hit. The crowd murmured. The warrior lunged again. Raina feigned a misstep, letting her guard drop. At the last second, she twisted, striking back just enough to push her opponent off balance. The crowd gasped, then cheered. It wasn't victory. It was survival dressed as competence. When the fight ended, Elder Mora raised her staff. "Victory to Era of Silvercrest." Applause rippled through the hall, but beneath it came the low tide of whispers. Some praised her skill, others questioned it. Her father's face betrayed nothing, though his jaw tightened with disapproval. As Raina left the ring, she caught sight of Alaric again. He hadn't joined the applause. His eyes followed her with unsettling focus, as if he saw not the warrior she pretended to be, but the truth beneath the armor. Outside, in the garden that bordered the training hall, she let herself breathe for the first time since dawn. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of cedar. "That was quite a fight," a voice said behind her. She turned. Alaric stood among the shadows of the stone archway, arms folded. Up close, his presence was even more commanding. Steady, quiet, unreadable. "I wasn't aware Thornville Alphas made a habit of complimenting their rivals," she said cautiously. He smiled faintly. "I only compliment what surprises me. And did I, perhaps?" His gaze lingered, sharp as the wind. "But I can tell when someone isn't fighting to win." Her heart stilled. "You're mistaken. Maybe." His tone was calm, almost indifferent. Or maybe I've seen that look before. The look of someone who carries too much to strike first. Before she could respond, voices called from the hall, summoning the candidates for the closing ceremony of the day. Alaric stepped back into the shadows. "Until the next trial," he said. Raina watched him disappear into the torchlight. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. She told herself it was only curiosity, but deep down, something whispered a warning. The kind of warning that always comes before fate changes everything. Chapter 4. The Second Trial. The forest of Silvercrest stretched endless beneath the rising sun, a living cathedral of shadow and mist. Pines towered like sentinels, their branches heavy with dew, the air so still it felt sacred. From the edge of the clearing, Raina stood with the other candidates, her heart thudding against her ribs as the ancient healer, Elder Mora, lifted her staff. "The second trial," Mora declared, "is the hunt. Each of you will bring back prey before sunset. Skill, endurance, and precision will be judged. What you return with reflects not only your strength, but your worth." Raina drew in a slow breath. The rules were simple, but her purpose was not. To fail convincingly, she needed control. Too much hesitation, and she'd expose her plan. Too much competence, and she'd advance in a role she no longer wanted. At the sound of the horn, the other candidates shifted. Bones lengthened, claws extended, and the air filled with the sound of transformation. Raina followed, letting her wolf rise to the surface. Fur rippled down her spine, the world sharpening into color and scent. Her senses expanded. The pulse of birds in the trees, the damp earth beneath her paws, the heartbeats of her competitors fading into the distance. When she ran, it wasn't with the fury of a predator. It was quieter, measured, every movement chosen. She veered south, away from the fresh tracks of deer that the others would chase, into the older parts of the forest, where the trees grew closer together and the light barely reached the ground. Here, the silence was complete. Only her breathing and the rhythm of her paws on the leaves broke it. She could have found a deer easily. Her wolf's instincts whispered directions, scents, and the faint trails of prey. But she ignored them. Instead, she tracked smaller prints, faint, quick, belonging to something insignificant. A rabbit. It would be enough to pass the trial without honor. Enough to humiliate her father, but not enough to risk suspicion of intent. Hours slipped by in muted gold and gray. She waited near a patch of bramble until the rabbit appeared, its white fur catching a sliver of light. One swift motion, one merciful strike. The forest held its breath, then released it. When she returned to the clearing, the sun had begun to sink behind the ridges. 4 candidates stood already, each with a deer laid before them. Clean kills, proof of mastery. Their armor gleamed, their expressions confident. Raina stepped forward and placed the rabbit at Elder Mora's feet. Then came the murmurs, low, sharp, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. Is that her offering? The Silvercrest heir brings back a rabbit. Perhaps grief has softened her. Her father's jaw clenched, the muscle flickering beneath his beard. His aura darkened, authority pressing into the air like weight. Elder Mora's eyes, old and knowing, lingered on Raina. Era of Silvercrest, she said slowly. Your offering is humble. You have completed the trial, but without distinction? Raina bowed her head. As the spirits willed, a ripple of disbelief moved through the assembly. The healer's gaze softened for a heartbeat, then she nodded once. You may proceed to the final test. It wasn't a victory. It was permission to endure shame. As the crowd dispersed, Raina felt her father's stare like heat against her back. She didn't need to look to know what his eyes promised. Later, when the hall emptied and the torches burned low, Raina waited outside near the stone archway where vines climbed the wall. The night air was heavy with the scent of pine and rain. You meant to do that. The voice came from the shadows. Alaric stepped into the torchlight, his presence quiet but unyielding. His eyes reflected the flames, green and gold like forest glass. Raina didn't flinch. Believe what you wish. I believe in what I see, he said evenly. You move like a wolf who carries someone else's weight. You fight like someone who doesn't want to be seen winning. His words struck closer to truth than she wanted to admit. And what does a Thornvale Alpha care about Silvercrest politics? I care when I see a lie wrapped in armor, Alaric replied. Not because it's my concern, because it's familiar, Raina frowned. Familiar? He stepped closer, stopping just short of the line that would have been considered improper between rival packs. His voice dropped. Once, I watched someone lose everything trying to live for others. It never ends well. Before she could respond, voices echoed from the courtyard beyond. Warriors passing by. Alaric stepped back into the shadows, his expression unreadable. Good night, Silvercrest, he said quietly. Try not to lose yourself before the final trial. Chapter 5. The Alpha's Wrath. The storm had returned by the time Raina reached the keep. Thunder rolled low across the mountains, and the torches along the corridor flickered with every gust of wind. She could already sense her father's fury waiting beyond the council doors. The air itself felt heavier, charged with unspoken judgment. Guards opened the doors before she could knock. Inside, the chamber glowed with firelight and tension. Her father stood near the hearth, a broad shadow framed by the orange flame. Her mother sat to the side, hands clenched in her lap. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then his voice came, quiet, deliberate, far more dangerous than shouting. Explain yourself. Raina kept her posture steady. I completed the trial. With a rabbit, he replied. The word struck like a blow. Do you know what they whispered after you left? They called Silvercrest a broken house. They laughed at your sister's name. I did what you could, he repeated, turning fully toward her. You could have brought honor. Instead, you dragged Era's memory through the mud. Her mother rose quickly. Godric, He lifted a hand, silencing her. His gaze never left Raina. Was this incompetence or rebellion? Raina's throat tightened, but she refused to look away. You wanted Era in the arena. You wanted her strength, her confidence. I gave them what they expected to see. Enough to continue, not enough to win. Isn't that what you asked of me? To pretend? The room went still. Her father's expression darkened, the calm before the break of a storm. Pretending is not failure, he said. Pretending keeps us alive. What you did today invites wolves to our borders. Raina stepped forward, voice low but steady. Then maybe the borders need testing. Her mother caught her breath. Raina, but the words were out now, unstoppable. You've built this pack on fear, father. On appearances, you command loyalty, but you don't inspire it. Era's death proved that. The silence that followed was sharp as broken glass. Godric moved closer, and for a moment, Raina saw not the alpha but the soldier he had once been, every line of him drawn by battle and loss. His voice, when it came, was quieter still. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoy forcing my daughter into a ghost place? Everything I do to keep Silvercrest from collapsing? Then maybe it's already collapsing, she whispered. For a long time he said nothing. Then he turned away, his shoulders rigid. The final trial is tomorrow. You will win it. Do not fail again. When he left, The echo of his boots followed him down the hall like a warning. Her mother approached slowly. "He's grieving in his own way," she said. "That doesn't excuse him, but it explains him." Raina stared at the fire. Grief doesn't have to become cruelty. Adar hesitated, then placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You are stronger than you think. Don't let his anger turn you into someone else." When Raina finally stepped out into the courtyard, the rain was falling harder. She walked without direction, letting the cold soak through her clothes. The torches blurred into streaks of gold through the downpour. Silvercrest air, walking alone in a storm. She turned sharply. Alaric stood beneath the archway, rain glistening on his cloak. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held a steady calm that contrasted with the turmoil inside her. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I could say the same," he replied, "but I heard the council walls shaking. Thought someone might need air." "I don't need your concern." "Good," he said, "because it isn't concern. It's curiosity." Raina frowned. "Curiosity about what? About how someone can stand in front of an alpha like Godric and still speak truth." "Not immediately," he said, "but it changes who hears it." They stood in silence for a while, the rain a constant rhythm around them. The distant sound of wolves howling drifted from the forest's edge. "You'll face the final trial soon," Alaric said at last. "Whatever happens, remember, your strength isn't in imitation, it's in choice." Before she could reply, he stepped back into the darkness, leaving only the sound of his footsteps fading with the storm. Raina looked toward the horizon where lightning carved the sky. The trials had begun as her father's plan, a performance meant to protect a name, but somewhere along the way, they had become something else. A reckoning, perhaps. She no longer knew whether she feared victory or failure more. By the next sunrise, the rain had ceased, leaving the valley veiled in thin mist. The air carried a metallic chill, heavy with expectation. Raina dressed in silence, her hands steady even as her pulse thundered beneath her skin. The pendant around her neck glimmered faintly in the dim light, the last piece of her sister she had left. When she stepped into the corridor, her mother was waiting. Idira's eyes were tired, but her voice held calm. "Whatever happens today," she said, "remember, your worth isn't measured by their approval." Raina nodded once. Words would only break the fragile stillness holding her together. The great hall of Silvercrest had been transformed for the final trial. Tall torches lined the stone walls, their flames stretching toward the vaulted ceiling. The banners of the 5 packs hung high, colors bright and unyielding. At the center stood a circular dais of carved stone, its surface etched with ancient runes that shimmered faintly under the firelight. The audience filled every corner, alphas, envoys, warriors, and seers, all watching. Among them, Alaric of Thornvale stood near the front, arms folded, gaze sharp and unreadable. Elder Mora raised her staff, and the hall fell silent. "The final trial," she announced, "is the trial of wisdom. It is not strength or speed that decides Aluna's fate here, but judgment. Each candidate will face a question of loyalty, leadership, and heart." The first candidate was called forward, a warrior from the Mooncliff pack. Mora's question tested her loyalty to her alpha. Her answer was strong but rigid, a rehearsed declaration of obedience. The crowd murmured approval, then the second, then the third. Each gave answers that mirrored their pack's values: discipline, unity, tradition. When Raina's name was spoken, the air seemed to thin. She walked forward, each step echoing against the stone floor. Her father's gaze followed her like a blade pressed between her shoulder blades. Elder Mora's eyes, sharp and ancient, fixed on her. "Era of Silvercrest," she began. "Aluna leads not only through power, but through choice. You are told your alpha commands a war that may cost countless lives. You disagree with his decision, but disobedience could fracture your pack. Do you obey or defy?" The question hung in the air, heavy as the storm before lightning. Raina knew what her father expected. The answer was simple: obedience, loyalty above all else. That was the Silvercrest way. But something deep within her rebelled. She thought of Era's death, of the endless demands, of the silence that had become their home. She thought of Alaric's words. Your strength isn't in imitation, it's in choice. She lifted her chin. A Luna must see beyond command, she said slowly. Obedience keeps the pack safe, but blind obedience destroys it. If the Alpha leads toward ruin, it is her duty to stand between his pride and their future. Gasps rippled through the hall. Her father's face turned to stone, eyes glinting with quiet fury. Elder Mora's expression softened almost imperceptibly. And what if defiance cost you everything? Raina met her gaze. Then I will have lost what wasn't mine to keep. Silence fell so deep that even the torches seemed to waver. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, unexpectedly, applause rose, from the back rows, tentative at first, then growing. It wasn't loud, but it was genuine. Alaric's hands were among those that began it, though his expression remained composed. Elder Mora struck her staff against the stone once. The trial is concluded. Raina bowed and turned to leave, the sound of whispers trailing behind her. Some called her brave, others reckless. When she reached the hall's edge, her father's voice stopped her. A word, he said, his tone low and dangerous. The crowd parted as he approached, every eye fixed on them. What you said today, he murmured, has undone everything we've built. Maybe it's time it was undone, Raina replied quietly. For a heartbeat, she thought he might strike her, but he didn't. His restraint was worse than fury. It was cold, measured silence. Return to your chamber, he said. Do not speak to anyone until I decide what to do with you. He turned away, leaving her standing alone under the banners that now felt more like cages than symbols of pride. That night, the castle lay still. Raina sat by her window, the candle beside her flickering low. The trials were over. She had spoken truth, defied expectation, and yet peace did not come. Her father's silence haunted the corridors. The pack would gossip by morning, and her act of defiance would spread faster than wind through the pines. Then came a soft knock at her door. She hesitated before answering. When she opened it, Alaric stood there, cloak still damp from the night air. I shouldn't be here, he said simply, but I needed to say this. You changed something today. Not just for your pack, but for every wolf who heard you. Raina's voice was quiet. I didn't mean to start anything. The truth never asks permission, he replied. For a moment, they simply stood in silence, the weight of everything between them unspoken. When he turned to leave, Raina said softly, Why are you telling me this? He paused at the threshold. Because someone will come for you soon. And when they do, you'll need to decide whether to keep pretending or start living. He left before she could ask what he meant. As the door closed, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance once more. Raina sat beside the window until dawn, the first light of morning glinting off her sister's pendant. The trials had ended, but the real reckoning had only begun. Chapter 7. The Unmasking. The dawn after the final trial should have brought calm. Instead, it brought silence, the kind that presses against the walls like a held breath. Raina woke to find the entire fortress hushed, the corridors empty except for the echo of distant voices behind closed doors. From her window, she could see the training yard below. Warriors gathered in clusters, whispering. Every head turned toward the main tower, where the Alpha's banner hung still and unmoving in the cold wind. Something had changed. She could feel it. Her mother entered quietly, her expression pale with exhaustion. Your father has called a council, she said. All Alphas, all elders. They're meeting now. Raina straightened. Because of the trials? Idara hesitated before nodding. Your words yesterday spread faster than we expected. Some call them wisdom. Others call them rebellion. Rebellion, Raina repeated softly. That didn't take long. Idara clasped her hands. You need to be careful. The elders are divided. Some believe you dishonored Era's name. Others think you've exposed the Alpha's weakness. Either way, they'll use you to settle their disputes. Before Raina could reply, the door opened abruptly. A guard stepped in, bowing stiffly. The Alpha requests your presence in the council chamber. Her mother's grip tightened around her wrist. Whatever happens, remember, truth can't be taken back, but it can be stood upon. Raina met her eyes, nodded once, then followed the guard. The council chamber was vast, lit by torches that flickered against the walls. The alphas of the 5 packs sat in a semicircle around her father's throne. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to cold judgment. Elder Mora stood to the side, hands clasped over her staff. When Raina entered, all conversation ceased. Her father's voice cut through the silence. "My daughter," he began. "You stand here not as kin, but as a representative of Silvercrest. Yesterday's words have reached every corner of this alliance. They question not only your intent, but my leadership." Raina stood tall despite the weight pressing on her shoulders. "Then let them question it," a murmur rippled through the gathered alphas. Her father's eyes hardened. "Do you understand what you're saying?" "Yes," she replied. "For too long this pack has traded truth for reputation. I only spoke what every warrior already knows, that loyalty without conscience is no loyalty at all." Her words struck like the echo of thunder. Some faces turned away. Others nodded subtly, though none dared speak. Before her father could respond, another voice filled the space, steady, deep, and calm. She only said what needed saying. Every head turned. Alaric of Thornvale stepped forward from the far side of the chamber, his cloak brushing the stoned floor. His presence carried the kind of authority that didn't require volume. "This council exists to protect balance between our packs," he continued. "If truth now counts as treason, perhaps our balance was fragile to begin with." The silence that followed felt alive. Her father's gaze sharpened. Thornvale was not invited to speak on Silvercrest matters. Alaric's tone remained composed. "And yet your daughter's trial was witnessed by all. What she did under the eyes of the Alliance. Her courage belongs to us all, not just your household." Raina felt the weight of every stare turned toward her again. 1,000 questions hung between them, none voiced aloud. Her father rose slowly. "You speak boldly for a rival," he said. "Do you seek to lecture me in my own hall?" Alaric's expression didn't change. "No, Alpha. I seek to remind you that strength isn't silenced by authority. It's revealed through it." The tension between them hummed like drawn steel. Elder Mora raised her staff, her tone a calm interruption. "Enough! The purpose of this council is not to measure tempers, but to decide truth. The trials are complete. By tradition, the candidate's worth is judged not only by performance, but by spirit. I have witnessed all 5. None spoke with more conviction than she did." Whispers spread through the room. Godric's hands tightened at his sides. "You would name her Luna? After that display?" "I would name her Honest," Mora replied simply. "And honesty has become rare among us." The silence that followed was long and dangerous. Then her father spoke again, each word deliberate. "Leave us." The council dispersed reluctantly. Even Alaric paused before stepping out, his gaze meeting Raina's for a brief moment. Steady, unwavering. When the doors closed, only the 3 of them remained, Godric, Raina, and her mother. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the void where words refused to form. Finally, her father turned. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Why are you doing this?" Raina held his gaze. "Because pretending to be Era won't bring her back. And pretending that strength means silence won't save this pack." His expression twisted, not in rage, but in something far more painful. "You sound just like her," Raina blinked. "Like Era?" "No," he said softly, "like your mother before the weight of this leadership broke her spirit." Idara closed her eyes briefly, as if remembering another lifetime. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then her father exhaled heavily and turned toward the window. "The council will choose by dusk. If they name you Luna, it will be out of defiance, not faith. That will make you a symbol, one our enemies will use." "Then let them," Raina said. "Symbols endure longer than silence." He didn't answer. When she left the chamber, his figure remained still before the fire, shadowed by its light. Outside, the corridors buzzed again with whispers. As she stepped into the courtyard, Bryn hurried toward her, face pale. "The council's decision will be made public tonight," she said breathlessly. "But there's more. Someone leaked word that you're not Era." Raina froze. "Who told them?" "I don't know," Bryn said. "But if the rumor spreads before the announcement—" A sound cut through her words, a horn's distant call echoing from the watchtower. It was the alarm signal, one reserved for threats at the border. The ground beneath them seemed to shift. Bryn gripped her arm. "Whatever's happening, it's not coincidence. They're moving too fast." Raina looked toward the horizon where the mountain ridge split the clouds. Her heart tightened. Whether this was betrayal or fate, the truth was no longer hers to hide. For the first time, she felt neither fear nor defiance, only clarity. The storm she had tried to avoid was finally here. Chapter 8. The Betrayal at Dusk. The warning horn still echoed when the first drops of rain began to fall again. They struck the courtyard, stones like hurried footsteps, urgent and uneven. Raina stood beneath the balcony archway, staring toward the ridge where the sound had come from. "Border alarm," Bryn whispered beside her. "But there's no smoke, no fire. It's not a raid." "No," Raina murmured. "It's a message." Within moments, guards poured through the gates, armor clattering, voices rising in confusion. The banner of Silvercrest snapped in the wind as thunder rolled overhead. Every instinct in Raina's chest told her that this storm wasn't born of weather. It was consequence. A herald sprinted across the courtyard, cloak soaked through. "The council's decision," he called, holding a sealed scroll above his head. "By decree of the assembled alphas, the chosen Luna of the Alliance is," he faltered, breath catching as his gaze met Raina's. "To be determined at dawn. The vote has been delayed." A collective murmur surged through the crowd. Delayed, it meant dispute. It meant someone had raised an objection strong enough to fracture tradition itself. Her father appeared on the high steps, expression carved from stone. "Inside," he commanded. "All of you." Raina followed him into the council hall, the air thick with the scent of wet ash from the torches. Alaric was already there, standing near the doorway like a shadow that refused to be dismissed. "What is this?" her father demanded of the herald, who halted the vote. The herald bowed low. Thornvale objected. "Alpha. They claim new information questions the candidate's identity." Every eye turned toward Alaric. He did not flinch. Godric's voice dropped to a growl. "Is this your doing?" Alaric met his stare evenly. "If your council cannot separate rumor from truth, perhaps it deserves neither." Raina stepped forward, heart steady but heavy. "What rumor?" Alaric hesitated only a moment. "That the woman standing before this council is not Ira Silvercrest, but her twin, Raina." The chamber filled with sound. Gasps, denials, the scrape of boots as guards moved instinctively closer to their alpha. Raina's father froze. In that instant, the lie that had protected their family collapsed. The illusion she had carried for weeks cracked open under the weight of exposure. "It's not true," Godric said sharply, a fabrication meant to discredit. But Elder Moore raised her staff. "Enough." Her tone silenced the room. "I have heard whispers for days, and though I swore to judge only by spirit, truth cannot be ignored." She turned her gaze to Raina. "Speak plainly. Who are you?" Raina felt the world narrow to the rhythm of her breathing. Around her, torches hissed as if the flames themselves waited for an answer. "I am Raina," she said. "Era's sister." Her mother's hand went to her mouth. Her father's face turned the color of cold iron. The murmuring swelled into disbelief, outrage, accusation. Alaric spoke again, calm amid the chaos. "She entered these trials under command. She did what she was ordered to do." "You dare speak for her?" One of the elders snapped. "I speak because none of you cared to ask why a daughter would carry such a burden," Alaric replied. The words hung in the air like lightning waiting to strike. Then, without warning, one of the guards at the back moved, a flicker of metal, the unmistakable glint of a drawn blade. The motion was quick, almost hidden by the crowd's movement. But Alaric saw it first. Down, he shouted. The dagger flew. It struck the pillar beside Raina with a sharp clang, scattering sparks. Guards surged forward. The would-be attacker was seized before he could vanish into the confusion. The hall erupted into shouts. Some claimed the assassin acted for Thornvale, others swore he was Silvercrest's own. In the chaos, Alaric caught Raina by the arm and pulled her toward the side passage. "You're not safe here," he said quietly, urgency under every word. "This isn't debate anymore, it's blood." Raina resisted only long enough to glance back. Her father stood at the center of the storm he had created, shouting orders to his men, fury and disbelief tearing through every command. Their eyes met once across the room. In that look lay accusation, regret, and something that might once have been love. Then the crowd closed between them. Alaric led her through narrow corridors lit only by the flicker of wall torches. Outside, the rain had turned to mist again, wrapping the fortress in a pale shroud. "Where are we going?" Raina asked. "Out of sight until we know who sent that blade." They stopped beneath an ancient stone bridge that arched over the southern stream. The roar of water covered their voices. Raina leaned against the cold stone, breath coming in uneven bursts. "He'll think you planned this," she said. "He'll see your defense as proof." "I expected that," Alaric answered. "But you'd be dead if I hadn't moved." She looked at him, searching for any trace of deceit and finding none. "Why help me?" "Because lies don't deserve death," he said simply. "And because I've seen too many leaders bury the truth to keep their crowns." The sound of hooves echoed faintly in the distance. Messengers racing through the night to spread the news. There would be no containing it now. Raina drew the pendant from beneath her collar, the small silver charm catching the dim light. This was hers, she said softly. All this time, I told myself I was wearing it to honor her. Maybe I was only hiding behind it. Alaric's gaze stayed on the pendant. "Then stop hiding." A pause stretched between them, filled only by the rhythm of the river and the whisper of rain on leaves. "What happens now?" she asked. He looked toward the fortress where torches still flickered along the walls. "Now, the packs will choose sides. Some will stand with your father. Others will see opportunity in chaos. Either way, you can't stay here tonight." Raina nodded slowly. "If I leave, they'll call it guilt. If you stay, they'll make it guilt." She turned her eyes to the mountains, where thunder rolled again, softer now, like a warning fading into distance. "Then we move before dawn," she said. Alaric inclined his head once. "Agreed." Together they watched the light of Silvercrest flicker through the fog, bright, uncertain, and ready to ignite. Behind those walls, her father's council argued over succession, over betrayal, over who should lead. None of them yet understood that the moment truth entered the room, the old order had already fallen. Raina pressed the pendant against her palm until its edges bit her skin. The pain steadied her. For the first time since her sister's death, she was not pretending. And the path ahead, though dangerous, finally belonged to her. Chapter 9. The Flight Through the Storm. Before dawn, the fortress slept uneasily. Torches burned low in the hallways, their flames struggling against the wet wind seeping through the cracks in the stone. Raina moved in silence, the hood of a traveler's cloak drawn over her face. Every echo of her boots felt too loud in the stillness. Behind her, Alaric followed without sound, his stride deliberate, measured. They passed the armory, then the northern stairwell where guards normally stood watch. Tonight it was empty, a sign of how deeply chaos had sunk its teeth into Silvercrest. The gate loomed ahead, iron and oak slick with rain. The 2 sentries stationed there stiffened when they saw her. "Alpha's orders," one said. "No one leaves until the council reconvenes." Alaric stepped forward, his tone calm but edged. "You've heard the rumors. Do you really believe keeping the Alpha's daughter trapped will restore honor?" The guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain looks. Loyalty wavered in their eyes, torn between command and conscience. Raina spoke softly. "You both trained under Captain Tereth, didn't you? He taught you to trust your instincts over fear. that struck something in them. After a moment's silence, one lifted the latch. "You were never here," he muttered. Raina nodded in gratitude and slipped through the gate into the night. Outside, the wind carried the scent of pine and river water. The path down from the fortress wound through the lower village, where shuttered windows hid the trembling candlelight of those who had already heard whispers of betrayal. They moved quickly, their cloaks blending into the mist. Every sound, the creak of wood, the distant bark of a dog, felt like a warning. At the foot of the hill, Alaric stopped. "We need shelter until the border," he said. "The mountain passes are watched." "There's an old watchtower near the river," Raina replied. "Era and I used to hide there during training." He gave a brief nod, and they turned toward the forest trail. The trees closed around them like walls. Rain filtered through the branches, tapping softly against leaves. Raina's breath formed pale clouds in the cold air. For the first time since leaving the keep, she allowed herself to speak freely. "My father will call this treason," she said. Alaric's reply was steady. "He'll call it whatever protects his power. You saw how quickly they turned on each other in that hall. No pack can survive long when its truth is divided." She frowned. "You sound as though you've lived it." He didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, Thornvale lost half its warriors to an alpha who believed fear could hold loyalty together. It can't. It only teaches the strong to hide. Raina glanced at him through the rain. "And you? You stopped hiding?" "I learned that leading means walking toward the storm, not around it." They continued in silence until the faint shape of the old watchtower appeared. Ahead, half collapsed, its roof sagging beneath years of neglect. The sound of the river filled the air, rough and insistent. Inside, the tower smelled of damp wood and stone. Broken beams crisscrossed the floor, and moss crept up the walls. Yet, it was shelter. Alaric coaxed a small flame from the flint he carried, lighting a stub of candle. Shadows stretched along the walls, moving like restless spirits. Raina sank against the base of the wall, exhaustion pressing down on her shoulders. "All of this began with a lie," she said quietly. "I thought I could control it. Now it controls everything." Alaric studied the small flame. Lies don't survive daylight for long. Someone wanted this exposed. The timing was too precise. Raina's brow furrowed. "You think the assassin wasn't acting alone?" He shook his head. "Assassins never do. Whoever ordered that attack expected you to die before the truth reached the council." That would have ended the story neatly. An unfortunate tragedy following a scandal. No questions left. She drew her cloak tighter. So they failed. For now. The candle flickered, then steadied. Wind pressed against the cracks of the tower, howling like a living thing. Raina pulled the pendant from beneath her cloak, turning it over in her hand. The silver gleamed faintly. When they buried Era, I thought this was all that was left of her. But look. She pressed a thumb along the edge and felt a small ridge she had never noticed before. A seam. The metal clicked, revealing a hidden compartment no larger than a coin. Inside lay a folded scrap of parchment, faded but intact. Her breath caught. This was hers. Alaric leaned closer, careful not to touch. "What does it say?" Raina unfolded the paper, eyes scanning the faint ink. A single line stood out, written in her sister's hand. "If I don't return from the eastern cliffs." It wasn't an accident. The words struck like lightning. Raina's voice trembled despite her composure. She knew. She knew she was being hunted. Alaric's jaw tightened. Then her fall wasn't fate. It was murder. Outside, thunder answered like an oath. Raina folded the note carefully and slipped it back into the pendant. Whoever wanted her gone wanted silence afterward. And now that silence has a voice. Alaric met her gaze, the candlelight reflected in his eyes. "Then we find who silenced her, and if it's my father," she asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "Then truth still stands above blood." The wind tore through the cracks again, scattering ashes from the candle flame. Raina stared into the dark beyond the tower door, her resolve hardening. The lie that had begun as protection had become the spark for war. But for the first time, she was no longer afraid of what truth might cost. By morning, the rain had stopped. Mist clung to the forest floor, and the first hint of sunrise glowed through the trees. Raina fastened the pendant around her neck once more. "Where do we go now?" Alaric asked. "To the cliffs," she said. "If Era left a warning, maybe she left proof." He nodded, and together they stepped out into the dawn. The forest swallowed their figures as the light grew stronger, two shadows moving toward the place where all lies had begun, and where the truth waited beneath the stones. Chapter 10. Echoes at the Cliffs. The climb toward the eastern cliffs began before sunrise. The world was still quiet, the forest draped in a pale silver mist that softened every edge. Raina led the way, boots sinking into damp earth, cloak pulled tight against the morning chill. The pendant rested cold against her skin, its hidden message still echoing in her mind. Alaric followed close behind, his presence steady and wordless. The path twisted upward through moss-covered rocks and narrow ridges that opened to sweeping views of the valley below. The air smelled of salt and rain, and far in the distance, thunder rumbled faintly over the sea. "This was where it happened," Raina murmured, when they reached a break in the trees. The cliffs stretched before them, vast and solemn, the edge falling away into mist and ocean. They said she fell during patrol, but she never patrolled alone. Alaric crouched near the cliff's edge, scanning the stone. Deep grooves marred the surface, too even to be weather marks. "These aren't natural," he said. Something heavy was dragged here. Raina knelt beside him, fingers tracing the lines. "Dragged, not fallen," her voice caught as she glanced down the precipice. Far below, waves crashed against jagged rocks, the sea foam ghostly in the morning light. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried only the cry of distant gulls and the steady roar of the tide. Alaric finally broke the silence. Era's death was staged. Whoever did this wanted it to look accidental. Raina's throat tightened. But why? She was loved, respected, everything the pack needed, which made her dangerous to whoever wanted change, Alaric said. "The same reason they wanted you silenced." Raina looked at him sharply. "You think the same person who killed her tried to kill me? I think the pattern fits too perfectly to ignore." She rose slowly, moving toward a cluster of stones near the edge. Small weathered markers placed long ago to honor the dead. Someone had left fresh flowers there. Wild heather, still damp with dew. Her hand trembled as she touched the petals. "Someone's been here recently. Then we're not alone," Alaric said quietly. Before she could reply, a faint rustle sounded from the trees behind them. Instinct took over. Raina's pulse quickened, and she turned sharply, scanning the shadows. A figure stepped out of the mist, cloaked, hooded, moving with deliberate calm. Raina's first thought was that it might be a scout from her father's guard. But when the stranger lifted their head, she froze. "Bryn?" Her friend's face was pale, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Raina's confusion cut through her fear. "You followed us. I didn't have a choice." Bryn's voice trembled, torn between guilt and urgency. "They know you left. Your father's furious. He's claiming Thornvale kidnapped you. The packs are already choosing sides." Raina's chest tightened. "He's turning this into war?" "It's worse than that," Bryn whispered. "Someone inside the council is feeding him lies, convincing him Thornvale orchestrated everything. The assassin, the rumor, even Era's death. He's preparing to strike first." Alaric's jaw hardened. "So they'll start a war built on a falsehood." Bryn looked at him warily. "You shouldn't trust anyone right now. The council chambers are divided. And—" She hesitated, glancing at Raina. "Your mother's been confined to her quarters." Raina's hands curled into fists. "Because of me." "No," Bryn said softly. "Because she spoke your name in defense." They called it defiance. The world tilted for a moment, the sky above them too vast and cold. Raina took a step back, forcing her breath steady. Then we stop it before he burns the packs apart. Alaric studied her. You mean to go back? She nodded. If I don't, more will die for a lie. Bryn shook her head in disbelief. Raina, he'll have you imprisoned the moment you step through the gates. Then I won't go through the gates. A plan began forming, sharp and dangerous, in her mind. The council meets again tonight in the upper hall. If I can reach them before he declares war, I can tell them what we found. Era's message. The marks on the cliffs. The truth. Alaric crossed his arms. And how do you plan to get past the guards, the council wards, and an alpha ready to call you traitor? Her answer was quiet but certain. The same way I've survived this long, by not being seen until it's too late. A ghost of a smile touched Alaric's lips. You really are your sister's shadow. Raina turned toward him, determination hardening her features. Not anymore. They began their descent as the sun rose higher, the mist thinning into bright streaks of light that filtered through the forest. Raina moved quickly, every step driven by urgency. The world around her seemed sharper now. The scent of pine, the distant cry of hawks, the steady rhythm of the wind. When they reached the forest edge, Bryn stopped. If they find me with you, I'll be branded a conspirator. Raina's gaze softened. You've done enough, Bryn. Go home before they notice your absence. Bryn hesitated, then clasped Raina's hand tightly. Promise me one thing. Whatever happens, don't let them make you choose between truth and mercy. Raina nodded. I promise. Bryn turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Raina and Alaric alone once more. Alaric adjusted his cloak. You realize there's no safe way back from this. There's no safe way forward either, Raina said. But at least this way, the truth has a chance. They exchanged a look, an unspoken pact forged in stormlight and silence. Then they started down the trail toward Silvercrest. By the time they reached the outskirts of the fortress, dusk had begun to fall. Torches burned along the walls, casting long shadows across the wet stones. From afar, the keep looked unchanged, but Raina could feel the shift in the air, the way power gathered like a storm before it breaks. She stopped beneath a twisted oak overlooking the courtyard. If we move through the lower kitchens, there's a service tunnel that leads into the council wing, she said. Era used it to sneak out during training drills. Alaric's gaze swept the area, calculating. It's risky, but it's our best chance. As the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, they descended toward the hidden entrance. The sound of the sea carried faintly on the wind, distant yet familiar, a reminder of everything they had already lost. Raina touched the pendant once more, feeling its weight against her chest. We'll find whoever did this, she said softly. Alaric nodded. And when we do, the truth will speak louder than any command. The fortress loomed above them, cold and waiting. And in its shadow, two figures vanished into the stone passage, carrying the last hope of peace between the packs, and the memory of a sister whose voice still echoed in the wind. Night had fallen again by the time Raina and Alaric reached the shadowed valley below Silvercrest. The fortress rose above them like a slumbering beast, its towers silhouetted against the pale light of a cloud-streaked moon. The rain had stopped, but the stones still glistened, slick and dark. They crouched in the tall grass that grew near the outer walls, the scent of wet earth thick in the air. From this distance, the banners on the battlements looked tattered, their once proud silver sigils dim in the moonlight. Too quiet, Alaric murmured. No patrols on the southern wall. Raina nodded. He's drawn his guards inward. The council chamber's the only place still lit. The flicker of torchlight shimmered faintly from high windows, the same chamber where she'd stood accused only nights ago. The same place her father now prepared to declare war. This tunnel, she whispered, motioning toward a half-buried arch hidden by roots and ivy. It runs beneath the kitchens into the inner courtyard. Alaric gave her a brief nod. You lead. I'll follow. The passage smelled of damp stone and iron. Their footsteps echoed softly as they moved through the narrow corridor. Water dripped from the ceiling in slow, rhythmic beats, and the sound of the river outside faded behind them. When they finally emerged into the lower kitchens, the air was warmer, tinged with the faint scent of smoke and herbs. A few servants moved about, cleaning pots and whispering in hushed tones. Raina waited until their backs were turned, then motioned for Alaric to follow her up the narrow stairwell toward the council wing. The climb felt endless, each step a reminder that the path she'd chosen could not be undone. At the top, they paused before an arched door. Voices drifted through the heavy oak, the council in heated debate. Raina pressed her ear to the wood. "The Thornvale Alpha cannot be trusted," her father's voice thundered. "He's hidden her, twisted her words, turned her against us. This alliance has no future while that traitor breathes." Elder Mora's calm tones answered, "Alpha Godric, you speak as though war is justice. What if she speaks truth?" "Truth," he barked. "The truth is that my daughter is dead, and the impostor who wears her face has destroyed our honor." Raina closed her eyes, every word cut deeper than the last. Alaric's gaze met hers, steady and unwavering. "If you wait any longer," he said softly, "he'll convince them all." She nodded once. "Then we end this now." Before doubt could stop her, she pushed open the door. The chamber fell silent, every head turned. Raina stepped into the torchlight, her cloak falling back to reveal her face. "Your daughter is not dead," she said, "but the truth you've buried might kill what's left of this pack." Gasps rippled through the room. Her father froze at the far end of the long table, disbelief giving way to fury. "You dare enter this hall again?" His voice was low, dangerous. "After everything your lies have done?" "They were your lies," Raina said. "I only carried them." He rose slowly, the weight of authority radiating from him. "You shame your bloodline." "I honor it," she countered. Era didn't die by accident. Someone made sure of that, and left a warning to prove it. The room erupted into murmurs. Alaric stepped forward, placing the small silver pendant on the table. "We found this hidden in her belongings. It carries her handwriting." Godric's expression faltered for the briefest moment, then hardened again. "Forged." Elder Mora moved closer, lifting the pendant with care. Her eyes traced the etched words, and when she spoke, her voice trembled slightly. "It's genuine." The mark and ink match Era's letters. The silence that followed was suffocating. Raina took a step closer. She knew someone wanted her dead. "And now I know who." The room seemed to hold its breath. Her gaze locked on one of the council members, a man seated near the far corner, older, his robes marked with the insignia of the silver-crested visors. "Counselor Dareth," she said evenly. "You were assigned to oversee her training patrols. You were the last to see her alive." Dareth's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Baseless accusation," he snapped. "You have no proof." "Not yet," Raina said, "but the cliffs do. Drag marks, broken stone, and the same sigil carved into the rock that you wear on your ring." Gasps swept through the room again. Dareth instinctively hid his hand beneath the table. Her father's eyes darkened. "Show it!" Dareth rose abruptly, fury twisting his features. "You can't believe her. She's being manipulated by Thornvale's Alpha." Alaric's voice cut through the noise. "I've seen those markings myself. You can lie to her father, but not to me." For a heartbeat, the council stood frozen between truth and denial. Then Dareth made his move. His hand darted toward his cloak. Metal flashed, catching torchlight. Before he could draw the blade fully, a swift motion blurred across the room. Alaric stepped forward, striking the weapon from Dareth's grasp with practiced precision. The dagger clattered across the stone floor. Guards surged in, pinning the counselor against the wall. His protest broke into incoherent shouts. Raina's father stared, disbelief draining the color from his face. Elder Mora turned to him. "It seems the truth has finally spoken, Alpha." The words broke something inside him. He looked at Raina, not as an enemy, not as a shame, but as a daughter he had failed to hear. Slowly, he sank back into his chair, the weight of realization pressing his shoulders. Raina approached him cautiously. "You asked me once why I did this," she said softly. This is why. To bring her peace. To bring us all peace. For a long time, he said nothing. Then, quietly, Raina's throat tightened. No, I have my own. You have her strength, the torches hissed as a gust of wind swept through the open window. Outside, the first light of dawn began to rise over the valley. Elder Mora addressed the council. The Alliance will not fall tonight. We will reconvene at sunset to name a new Luna, one who has proven that truth outweighs fear. All eyes turned toward Raina. The air seemed to still around her. She did not bow or speak. She only stood there, the pendant resting in her palm, its weight both burden and promise. As the room slowly emptied, her father remained seated, staring at the empty space where Dareth had stood. Alaric lingered near the door, watching Raina with quiet respect. You risked everything, he said when the others were gone. I didn't have anything left to lose, she replied. He gave a faint, solemn nod. Then you've already won. Raina looked out toward the dawn beyond the window. The storm had finally broken, but the world it left behind was forever changed. Chapter 12. The New Dawn. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed in soft gray light. Silvercrest stood silent, its towers wreathed in low fog that clung to the stone, like a ghost reluctant to leave. Raina walked through the courtyard alone. The scent of rain mixed with the faint smoke of extinguished torches. Everywhere she looked, soldiers moved quietly, their faces drawn, uncertain. The revelation of the night before had spread faster than flame. The pack no longer whispered about betrayal. They spoke of reckoning. The counselor who had orchestrated Era's death had been taken to the holding cells beneath the keep. The news had broken the illusion of strength her father had built for years. But it had also set something free. Truth, painful and unrelenting, moving through Silvercrest like the wind that followed a storm. Her father had not spoken since. Raina reached the great hall doors and paused. Through the gap, she saw him seated in silence before the long table, shoulders bent under a weight she couldn't lift for him. She stepped inside quietly. He didn't look up. They'll never see me the same, he said at last. All these years of command, undone in a single night. Not undone, Raina said softly. Revealed. He gave a hollow laugh. Do you know what it means when an alpha's word becomes questioned? It means fear takes root where loyalty once stood. Then replace fear with honesty, she said. It's harder to earn, but it lasts longer. He looked at her for the first time, truly looked, and in his eyes she saw the remnants of a man who had once led with pride, now fractured by regret. Era used to tell me the same thing, he murmured, that I was too proud to listen. The silence stretched between them like a bridge no one dared cross. Then he said quietly, The council will name you Luna tonight, her breath caught. I didn't ask for that, no, he replied, but they see what I refused to, your strength, your clarity. You've given them truth when all I gave them was command. She didn't answer. The thought of standing before the packs again filled her with both purpose and dread. The title of Luna was no longer a symbol of triumph. It was a burden of rebuilding what had been broken. I'm not Era, she whispered. I know, he said, and that's why you might succeed where she never could. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed through the hall. Alaric entered, his presence commanding yet calm. His cloak was still wet from the morning mist, and his eyes held the steady weight of someone who understood what silence often carried. Alpha, he greeted with a respectful bow. The council awaits your decision regarding the prisoner. Godric rose slowly. He'll be tried at dawn before all packs. His confession must be public so none can twist the truth again. Alaric nodded. Wise. Then his gaze shifted to Raina. They're already gathering outside. The other alphas want to speak with you before the ceremony. She hesitated. With me? They see you as the one who ended this, he said. They'll want to know what comes next. Raina drew a slow breath, steadying herself. Then they'll hear it. The courtyard was crowded when she stepped outside. Warriors, elders, and envoys from the allied pack stood together beneath the pale light. The tension that had once felt dangerous now hummed with something different. Anticipation, maybe even hope. Elder Mora stood at the center, her staff planted firmly in the stone. "Silvercrest stands at a crossroads," she declared, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Its heir has fallen, its secrets laid bare, but its future remains unwritten. Tonight, we choose who will guide that future." All eyes turned toward Raina. She stepped forward slowly, the hood of her cloak slipping back. The wind brushed her hair against her face, and for a moment, she felt Ira beside her. The same cliff wind, the same light. "I came before you wearing another's name," Raina began, her voice steady. "I did it because I was told that truth would make us weak. But I've learned that lies do far worse. They make us blind." A murmur rippled through the crowd, not of disapproval, but agreement. "My sister was murdered to protect a secret," she continued. "And the man who hid behind that act thought power could shield him forever. He was wrong. Power without truth is only fear wearing armor." She paused, letting the words sink into the silence. "I don't ask to lead because of my bloodline," she said. "I ask because I've seen what happens when truth dies. If we're to survive, not as rivals but as kin, we must begin again, together." Her words hung in the cold air, carried by the wind. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then one by one, heads bowed, not in submission but in respect. Her father watched from the steps, his expression unreadable. When Elder Mora turned toward him, he inclined his head. "Silvercrest accepts her claim." The courtyard erupted in sound, not cheers, but something deeper. Relief, resolution, the first fragile stirrings of renewal. Elder Mora raised her staff. "Then it is decided. Raina of Silvercrest is Luna of the Alliance. Let her reign be one of truth." The words echoed against the walls, and for the first time in what felt like years, Raina felt the air clear around her. Alaric stepped forward, the faintest trace of a smile in his eyes. "You've changed the course of every pack here," he said quietly. "I only spoke what needed to be said," Raina replied. "That's what real leaders do." She looked out over the gathering, the faces of wolves who had lost faith now turning toward her again. For the first time, she felt the bond of the pack not as a burden, but as something living, breathing, ready to heal. The council fire burned low as night deepened. Raina stood at its edge, watching the flames shift from gold to silver, their reflection flickering in her eyes. Her father approached, standing beside her in silence. The air between them was heavy, but not hostile. "You were right," he said finally. "Fear doesn't keep loyalty, it only buries it." Raina turned toward him. "Then let's stop burying things." He nodded slowly. "You have my strength now. Use it better than I did." For a moment, the sound of the crowd faded. The world seemed to hold its breath. Above them, the clouds began to part, revealing the moon in all its quiet brilliance. Raina looked up, the light catching her eyes, and whispered softly to herself, "We begin again." As dawn broke fully over Silvercrest, its towers gleamed like new stone washed clean by rain. The storm had not destroyed it. It had remade it, and for the first time since her sister's death, Raina no longer carried the weight of another's name. She carried her own. Chapter 13, The Shadows of Peace. Peace, Raina quickly learned, was not the silence that followed war. It was the whisper that preceded the next one. In the days after her coronation, Silvercrest shifted uneasily beneath the weight of its new beginning. The halls were cleaner, the banners restored, and yet the air carried tension, unspoken, waiting. Warriors still trained in the courtyard, but their movements were cautious, uncertain. Allies came with gifts, but also with watchful eyes. Raina stood on the balcony overlooking the training grounds. From this height, she could see the valley stretching endlessly below, the same valley that had nearly been lost to lies. Below, 2 young wolves sparred under the supervision of the captain of the guard. Their blades clashed with sharp precision, echoing off the stone walls. Each strike was a reminder that peace, for all its beauty, remained fragile. "You've built a calm surface," Alaric's voice came from behind her, but the currents underneath still move. She turned to find him leaning against the stone railing, his dark cloak catching the breeze. He had stayed at Silvercrest after the trials, acting as Thornvale's envoy. But the truth was unspoken. He stayed, because neither of them trusted what silence might bring if left alone. "I can feel it," Raina admitted. "The council speaks of unity, but I see division in their eyes." Alaric's gaze swept the horizon. "Change unsettles those who once thrived on control. They'll either adapt or scheme to restore what they lost." Raina frowned. "You think someone's still plotting?" "I think deceit doesn't vanish just because its master has fallen," he said. It changes hands. Before she could respond, footsteps echoed from the corridor. A young messenger appeared, bowing quickly. "Luna, a visitor from the eastern border requests audience. He claims urgent news regarding Thornvale." Alaric straightened instantly. "Send him in." The messenger nodded and hurried away. Moments later, a tall figure entered, mud-splattered cloak, exhaustion written across his face. He bowed deeply before them both. "My lady, my lord," he began, voice rough. "Forgive the intrusion, but Thornvale's border has been breached. Scouts from the Shadowfang territory were spotted near the river crossing." Alaric's expression hardened. "Shadowfang? They've kept to their mountains for years." "They have," the messenger said. "Until now?" Raina exchanged a look with Alaric. "You think they're testing you. Or testing you," Alaric said quietly. "Shadowfang never moves without purpose. They could be waiting for Silvercrest's response." The implication settled between them. If she sent aid, she risked spreading her forces thin and showing vulnerability. If she didn't, she'd appear indifferent to Thornvale's safety, undoing the fragile trust they had built. Raina turned toward the council chamber. "Then we'll bring this to the council." That night, the great hall blazed with torchlight once more. The council members gathered in a semicircle, their faces lined with fatigue and caution. Her father sat beside her, not as Alpha, but as her advisor now. "The messenger brings word of Shadowfang scouts crossing Thornvale's borders," Raina began. "This alliance was built to prevent such threats. We act together, or we fall divided." One of the elder advisors rose. "With respect, Luna, Silvercrest has only just stabilized. Our soldiers are weary, our stores thin. To march now could endanger our own." Another added, "Perhaps Thornvale provoked this conflict. Their lands sit close to disputed hunting grounds." Alaric's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Raina's tone sharpened. "Are you suggesting we ignore a threat to an allied pack?" The elder bowed his head slightly. "We suggest caution, my Luna." Caution, Raina thought bitterly, was the word people used when they meant fear. Her father spoke next, his voice even. A small envoy could be sent, a gesture of unity without exposing our defenses. Raina looked at him. "And if Shadowfang takes it as weakness?" He met her gaze with quiet weight. "Then we remind them peace was never born from fear, but from strength used wisely." She hesitated. Her father's words were calm, measured, and yet, beneath them, she sensed something else. A restraint, as though he knew more than he said. "Alaric," she said finally, turning to him, "take 50 of our scouts, ride to Thornvale's border, find out why they've crossed, and make sure this doesn't spread." Alaric nodded. At once, their eyes met briefly, and understanding passed without words. Whatever awaited him there, it would decide the future of the alliance they'd fought to protect. By the next morning, the fortress stirred with uneasy anticipation. The courtyard was alive with preparation. Horses saddled, supplies packed, scouts readying for departure. Raina watched from the balcony as Alaric mounted his horse. His dark cloak brushed the saddle, his expression unreadable but steady. "You're certain about this?" she called down. "Certain enough to find the truth," he replied, "and to bring it back." The sound of hooves filled the air as he and his riders moved out through the gates, the rising sun painting their path in streaks of gold and crimson. When they disappeared into the forest, Raina exhaled slowly. The silence left behind felt heavy, too quiet, too uncertain. Her father joined her at the railing, eyes following the fading riders. "You trust him?" he said quietly. "I do," Raina replied. "He's proven it." He nodded once, but his voice carried a trace of worry. "Trust is a powerful thing, Raina. It can build nations, or destroy them." She looked at him, sensing the shadow behind his words. "Do you know something I don't?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned away, leaving her with the uneasy truth that peace was never as still as it seemed. That evening, as dusk spread across the valley, Raina walked the outer walls alone. The wind carried the scent of distant rain again. She looked toward the horizon, where the forest met the fading light, and felt a familiar ache of waiting. Then, faint but unmistakable, the sound of a horn echoed through the distance, long, low, and mournful. The alarm, Raina's heart dropped. She turned toward the gate, her voice ringing through the corridors. "To arms! The border riders are returning. Sound the watch!" Within moments, the fortress exploded into motion. Guards sprinted across the yard, armor clanging. The great doors swung open, and a single horse galloped through, foam streaking its flanks. The rider, one of Alaric's scouts, fell to his knees before her. "Luna," he gasped, breath ragged. "Ambush. Thornvale riders attacked near the crossing. Alaric is missing." The world tilted. The courtyard went silent except for the wind. Raina gripped the man's shoulders. "Missing." "He stayed behind to cover our retreat," the scout said, eyes wide with fear. "Shadowfang. They knew we were coming." Raina's vision blurred, the words echoing like thunder in her skull. "Find him," she said, her voice breaking the silence like steel. "Find him before the dawn." Chapter 14. The Blood Oath. The courtyard had fallen into chaos. The sound of hurried boots and shouted orders filled the air, clashing with the steady beat of Raina's heart. She stood at the center of it all, the scout's words echoing in her mind. Alaric is missing. The world around her blurred, the torches, the stone walls, even the frightened faces of her warriors. All that remained sharp was the image of him vanishing into the trees, the morning sun burning behind his retreat. Her father's voice broke through the noise. "Raina, listen to me. If Thornvale's alpha has fallen, his people will retaliate." "You cannot abandon the keep." Raina turned to face him, her expression like carved glass. "He was taken while defending this alliance. I will not let him be forgotten on a battlefield we swore to protect." Godric's tone hardened. "Your duty is to Silvercrest." "My duty," she said firmly, "is to the truth that built Silvercrest. If we turn our backs on the ones who stood beside us, we become no better than those who betrayed us." Elder Mora approached, her staff striking the stone with each step. "She speaks what must be heard," the old woman said. "If Shadowfang has begun their hunt, it will not stop at Thornvale. This war will reach your gates whether you ride or hide." The courtyard fell silent at her words. Raina's eyes swept over the gathered soldiers, men and women who had once followed her father into every storm, now waiting for her command. "Ready the riders," she said. "We leave before moonrise." The preparations were swift and quiet. Armor clinked softly in the torchlight. Horses stamped against the cobblestones, and the scent of oiled leather filled the air. As Raina fastened the clasp of her cloak, Bryn appeared, her face pale but determined. "You're really going after him?" "There's no other choice." Bryn handed her a wrapped bundle. "Then take this, Era's blade." "You'll need." Raina hesitated, fingers brushing the worn leather sheath. "You kept it. I couldn't let it be buried with her," Bryn said quietly. She would have wanted it to fight again. Raina's throat tightened. "Then it will." She turned toward the gate, her heart steadying with each breath. As the riders mounted, Godric stepped forward one last time. "If you cross that border, you'll face more than Shadowfang scouts. You'll face a pack that thrives on chaos." Raina met his gaze. "Then I'll remind them that chaos ends when truth walks through its center." For the first time, her father didn't argue. He simply nodded. a silent acknowledgement between two leaders who finally understood each other. The journey to the border took the rest of the night. The forest loomed like a wall of black stone, each branch whispering warnings. The moon hung high, pale and watchful. Raina rode at the front, cloak whipping in the wind, Era's blade secured at her side. The scouts followed in silence, their breath forming small clouds in the cold air. When they reached the ridge overlooking Thornvale's river valley, the riders halted. Below, faint fires burned in the distance, enemy camps scattered like embers across the dark. A scout approached. "Tracks here, Luna. Multiple riders, heavy load." "They were moving prisoners," Raina said, scanning the ground. "Alaric's among them." "How can you be sure?" Raina crouched, fingers brushing a patch of disturbed earth. Embedded in the mud was a fragment of black cloth, torn and smeared with soot, the edge of a Thornvale cloak. She rose, eyes hardening. "Because he left this for us to find." They followed the trail deep into Shadowfang territory, through twisting paths and narrow ravines. Every sound, an owl's cry, a snapping twig, sent tension rippling through the group. As dawn began to break, the forest opened into a wide clearing. In its center stood a ruined watchtower, half swallowed by vines and fog. Smoke curled from a small camp at its base. Raina signaled for silence and dismounted. "We move on foot." The ground was soft underfoot, muffling their steps. The air smelled of damp earth and iron. From behind a fallen tree, Raina peered toward the camp. 3 Shadowfang sentries paced near a caged enclosure. Inside, chained but alive, sat Alaric, his face bruised, but his posture unbroken. Relief and fury surged through her chest at once. 3 guards, whispered one of the scouts. "Easy enough," Raina shook her head. "Too easy. There will be more nearby." As if summoned by her words, movement flickered in the shadows beyond the camp. 5, 6, then 10 figures, their armor dull black, their movements silent. An ambush. Raina exhaled slowly. "So they expected us. What now?" Bryn whispered. "We turned their trap against them. The plan unfolded like lightning. A thrown stone distracted one sentry, another fell silently to a well-placed arrow. When the third guard turned to shout, Raina was already moving, swift, precise. Era's blade flashed once, disarming rather than killing. The guard collapsed, winded but breathing. "Go," she hissed. The scouts rushed forward, engaging the hidden Shadowfang warriors as they emerged from the trees. The clash of steel filled the clearing, but Raina didn't slow. She reached the cage, breaking the lock with a sharp strike. Alaric looked up, disbelief flashing across his bruised face. "You shouldn't be here. You said the same thing last time," she replied, pulling him to his feet. Despite the pain in his movements, a faint smile touched his lips. "You never listen. Then stop being right." They moved together toward the tree line, covering each other's steps. Behind them, the fight raged on, arrows cutting through the dawn light. A sudden shout rose from the Shadowfang line. "The Luna of Silvercrest! Take her alive!" The words spread like fire. The attackers surged forward, their formation tightening. Raina turned sharply, raising her blade. "Fall back." Bryn appeared at her side, blood streaking her cheek, but her grip steady. "We're surrounded." Then we break through together. The next few moments blurred into motion. The clash of metal, the roar of defiance, the pulse of instinct guiding every strike. The air filled with smoke and grit. Then, just as the circle began to close, a horn sounded, a deep, thunderous call that rolled through the forest. The Shadowfang warriors froze. From the ridge above, dozens of riders appeared, cloaked in Thornvale colors, banners snapping in the wind. Raina's heart leapt. Reinforcements. At their head rode Alaric's second in command, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Thornvale stands with Silvercrest. Withdraw or be crushed." The Shadowfang forces hesitated, then broke ranks, melting back into the forest. When silence finally returned, the clearing lay scattered with broken weapons and the scent of burned air. Raina turned to Alaric. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," she interrupted, though her arms trembled from exhaustion. He studied her for a long moment, then said quietly, "You didn't come here out of duty." "No," she admitted. "I came because truth isn't worth much if you abandon those who fight for it." Alaric nodded slowly. "Then from this day forward, Thornvale owes Silvercrest a blood oath." Raina frowned. "A blood oath? It means unity sealed by honor," he said. "You saved me. You saved Thornvale. Our packs will stand together until the end." Raina glanced toward the rising sun. "Then let's make sure that end never comes." As the first light spilled across the forest, the two packs, once rivals, stood side by side for the first time in generations. Raina looked at the horizon and felt something shift within her. Not the weight of war, but the steady strength of peace earned, not given. For the first time, she no longer carried her sister's shadow. She had become her own storm and her own calm. Chapter 15, The Dawn Pact. The ride back to Silvercrest was silent, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion and reflection. The sun had already climbed high, scattering light through the treetops, touching the wet leaves with faint gold. The forest that had once seemed dark and endless now looked alive again, wounded, but breathing. Raina led the procession, her cloak torn and streaked with dirt, Era's blade resting across her lap. Behind her, Thornvale's survivors rode beside Silvercrest's guard, two banners flying side by side for the first time in generations. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth and iron, yet beneath it ran something cleaner, the quiet pulse of renewal. When the fortress came into view, Raina slowed her horse. The gate stood open, guarded by soldiers who froze in disbelief at the sight of Thornvale's colors beside their own. Word traveled faster than the riders. By the time they crossed the bridge, the courtyard was already filling with people. Villagers, warriors, elders, all gathering to see what fate had brought home. Raina dismounted, every muscle aching. Her father descended the steps, his face pale with both relief and confusion. "You brought them here?" he asked, voice low. "I brought back the truth," Raina said, "and the ally who risked everything for it." Alaric stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. "Thornvale stands with Silvercrest. We've both seen what happens when secrets rule in silence. No more walls, no more shadows." The murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some faces brightened with hope, others darkened with doubt. Elder Mora emerged from the hall, her staff tapping the stone as she approached. "Then let the old bond be renewed," she said. "And let those who would break it face the dawn with honesty." She gestured toward the courtyard fire pit, the same place where Silvercrest once held its oaths of loyalty. The flame had long gone cold, but with a nod from Raina, two guards approached and relit it. Smoke curled upward, white and clean. Raina stepped forward, her voice carrying across the square. "This fire once marked the beginning of an age of peace. Then it dimmed as we did. Today, it burns again. Not for one pack, but for all who still believe in what's worth protecting." She turned to Alaric, their gazes locking not in defiance, but in mutual understanding. "The alliance begins anew," she said. "Silvercrest and Thornvale, equals, not rivals. Our oath is not made in fear, but in faith." Alaric drew a dagger from his belt, its blade gleaming in the sunlight. "Then as tradition demands," he said, slicing his palm cleanly, "let the bond be sealed in truth." Raina mirrored the motion, pressing her hand to his. Their joined palms marked the pact, the blood of two leaders binding what politics had broken. Around them, the crowd began to kneel, first in solemn respect, then in unified acknowledgement. Elder Mora raised her staff. "By the will of the moon and the witness of the pacts, the Dawn Pact is formed. From this day forward, the Silvercrest and Thornvale shall stand as one voice against the darkness that stirs beyond their borders." The cheer that followed wasn't wild or loud. It was steady, a hum of relief, of weary hearts daring to hope again. Later, when the sun began to set, The celebration gave way to quiet reflection. The courtyard emptied slowly, leaving Raina alone by the fire. The flames had burned low, their light flickering across the stone. Her father approached, the shadows long behind him. "You've done what I couldn't," he said softly. "You united what I divided." Raina shook her head. "No, I only reminded them what unity was supposed to mean." He studied her face, pride and regret mingling in his eyes. Era would have been proud of you. The ache in her chest was gentle this time. Not grief, but memory. "I hope she found peace." "She has," he said, "because you did what she couldn't finish." They stood in silence for a while, the wind carrying the faint sounds of laughter from the village below. Then he turned toward the gates. "Rest, Raina. Tomorrow begins the work of rebuilding." When he was gone, she remained by the fire, lost in the dance of the embers. A voice broke her solitude. "You didn't let them see it," Alaric said, stepping from the shadows. "See what?" "The fear, the exhaustion, the cost." Raina smiled faintly. "Leaders don't get to show those." "Maybe they should," he replied. "Maybe that's how peace lasts." She looked up at him, the firelight catching the faint bruises still marking his face. "You could have stayed in Thornvale," she said. "You didn't have to return." "I made a promise," he said simply. "A leader protects his allies. And you," his gaze softened, "you're no longer just an ally." Raina looked back toward the mountains. The clouds were clearing, revealing the faint outline of the moon. "Then stay, at least until we know what's next." He nodded. "There's always a next." In the following days, the fortress transformed. Thornvale craftsmen worked beside Silvercrest builders, reforging old weapons into tools. Messengers carried word of the Dawn Pact across the neighboring territories. Some answered with congratulations, others with wary silence. Raina spent each dawn walking the ramparts, watching the valley awaken. The world felt new again, tentative but alive. Yet beneath the peace, she sensed something unfinished. Too many questions still lingered. One morning, as the mist lifted from the hills, a scout arrived from the northern outposts. His horse was covered in dust, his cloak torn by travel. "Luna," he said breathlessly, kneeling before her. "We found something beyond the Shadowfang border. Their camps are empty." "Empty," she repeated. He nodded. "Abandoned overnight. But there were markings on the trees, fresh ones. The same sigil carved into the rocks where your sister fell." Raina's breath caught. The courtyard around her seemed to fade. "How many markings?" she asked. "Dozens, maybe hundreds. Whatever they were planning, it's not over." The scout bowed and retreated, leaving her staring toward the horizon where the forest met the mountains. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of pine and distant smoke. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her sister's pendant against her chest. Then she turned toward the watchtower where Alaric waited, his expression already knowing. "It's beginning again," she said quietly. He nodded once. "Then we'll face it together, that night." The fire in the courtyard burned once more, stronger than before. The packs gathered again, not in celebration, but in readiness. Raina stood at the center, her voice steady as she addressed them. "The Dawn Pact was forged in truth," she said. "And truth does not end with one victory. If darkness rises again, then so will we, together." The wind caught her cloak, lifting it like wings as the moon rose overhead. For the first time in memory, Silvercrest and Thornvale howled as one, an oath that reached the mountains, echoing into the distance like a promise that the world would remember. And so, the storm that began with grief and deception ended in unity. But far beyond the borders of Silvercrest, shadows stirred again, watching, waiting, whispering the name of the Luna who defied fate.